Hey guys, in this video I'm going to talk a little bit about working for yourself or getting out there and doing your thing. I say this because I don't do a lot of business videos and I don't plan on necessarily unless you guys want to see those because in my experience, having met with lots of photographers and worked for a lot of photographers as assistants and befriended a lot of photographers over time, everybody seems to do things a little bit differently. Like, sure, there's certain things that people do. Like back in the day, you would put an ad in Workbook because if you were trying to get advertising work, because that's where a lot of advertising agencies drew their photographers. So of course you're going to put it in Workbook because that's where everybody else is. It's like, making sure that your product's on the shelf next to the other stuff. But in general, like the process of getting there. Like I know plenty of people who, went directly, shot a portfolio and went directly to advertising agencies and got work there, having never published anything. And I know people who shot for magazines for years and years before they did anything. I mean, I've done tons of things. I mean, most of it I don't talk about or really reference because it's not really. It was just part of what the steps it took to get me to where I'm going. But the thing is that ultimately, what I've found is working for yourself is the best thing, no matter what you're doing, you can possibly do. It's the most stressful thing sometimes, but it's also the most amazing thing because in the end, you have control. It doesn't feel like it at first, so there's definitely a balance that you have to work on when you start doing this kind of thing. But the reality is that if you have a job, like say a regular 9-to-5 job, maybe you do. Maybe you're watching this because you have a regular job and someday you want to be a photographer. Well, there's no time like the present. I mean, I'm not telling everybody to quit their jobs, but at the same time, you've got to weigh things, The idea is that, put it this way, if somebody's overweight, right, and they're constantly saying, man, I really want to lose weight, and they never do, okay, I'm referencing myself here, they don't really want to, right? They don't care. If they really cared, they would stop eating the junk food, they would start working out, they would do things to do that. People can transform their lives. You may say, I don't want to have a regular job, I want to have a business of my own. But if you are not taking steps to do that, you don't really want to do it. And I'll tell you what, I jumped into it really badly, actually. I mean, I did read some business books and stuff, but really I went to art school. I didn't know crap about business. I took my savings and I literally just moved to a location, Miami, where it seemed like there'd be work, not knowing anybody, literally nobody, with only the stuff I had in my car. That's all I did. I moved down there. I felt like if I was going to do it, I was going to do it. In fact, I was living in Massachusetts, which is where I'm from. It really occurred to me to maybe try New York first because it's so close. I can ride back in a few hours to see family or whatever. But then I realized that if I did that, I would have that to fall back on, and I couldn't do it. So I forced myself, because I know how I am, to put myself in a situation where I couldn't help but make it. And I didn't know how to get work, really, besides seeing in books. I thought that I was a great photographer. I wasn't. Those are other stories. I thought I was just going to start shooting right away and I was going to, that didn't happen, right? But I quickly realized that if I really wanted to pursue it, that I would need to figure it out. And that's what I did. And I think that's what you got to do. If you really want to do it as a business, well, number one, a lot of photographers that are watching this, I'm guessing, don't necessarily want to do photography in the sense that they want to shoot, a cover of Vogue. I mean, maybe you do want to do that. I think a lot of people are probably, they want to do portrait photography or wedding photography or pets, things like that. Make a little extra cash, maybe shoot some model portfolios, basically what is essentially a part-time or small business endeavor. One that you probably don't have to quit your job to do. Something you could do on the side, at least build it up that way, right? Until you get to the point where you could leave. So what's stopping you, right? There's so many things that are positive about working for yourself and doing a business long term. What's stopping you from doing it? Think about it. Like, you say you don't have the money, but do you really not have the money? I mean, couldn't you put aside, I'm a coffee addict. Couldn't you not buy coffee at the store? I remember I had a friend, Eric. Hey, Eric. We moved to New York around the same time, and I went to his apartment, and he literally had, I stayed over actually one night. He had no food. And I got up in the morning and I was like, make a pot of coffee. And I'm like, oh, make coffee. He's like, oh no, every morning I go down to the corner and I buy a bagel and coffee. And I was like, okay, and how much does that cost? And it was like $3.50 or whatever. And I was like, all right, so you buy a bagel and coffee for $3.50 every morning, right? $3.50 every morning, 30 days a month, right? You know how much that adds up to? And I started telling him the number, and he was just like, well, yeah, but, and I'm like, listen, You could buy a fucking bag of bagels or go to the bakery and get a dozen bagels, and you could buy a bag of coffee, and you would probably spend a third or less of that. And you'd have more because you could make a pot of coffee instead of one cup. And yeah, it was like, you're complaining you never have money. You're complaining you have old stuff. You don't have film to shoot, because back then we were shooting film. You know, it's like you say you don't have money to process your film, but like you throw out a few $100s a month on nothing. So it's hard, right? But anything you want to do is hard. And I think we, when I say we as like people living right now in America, because that's where I am, I mean, it's too easy to get credit cards. It's too easy to get credit. It's too easy to borrow things and to put things out and sign up for things that you have to pay later. And I think that puts us in a position where, like, if we can't just buy the camera right now, we think we can't do it. You know, when indeed, if you look at it like this, and it sucks because you reap the rewards later, but put that 20 bucks a month away, and believe it or not, it will add up. In the end, you will have that money to be able to do what you need to do. And you don't necessarily have to have the best equipment or the newest equipment. You look for deals, you make trades, you rent. I mean, I knew a guy that was a wedding photographer, a pretty successful one too, that owned almost no equipment. He literally rented it. He only did maybe less than a dozen weddings a year. They were all expensive, high-end weddings. And he always wanted to use the latest, newest equipment. So he literally owned nothing. When somebody booked him for a wedding, he factored into the cost, the $500, $600, $700, whatever it was, to rent the gear for that. And he went to the rental place. Of course, wedding photographers, take note. If the wedding was on like a Saturday, he would rent like from a Thursday to a Monday. He'd get the gear from the rental place. He'd bring it to his house. He'd test it, you know, make sure everything was good and perfect. You don't want to pick up rental gear the morning of a wedding, especially if it's your only camera. He'd use it, you know, and then he'd return it. And the next wedding, if there was a new camera out, something better, whatever, new lights, you want to try something, he would get that stuff. And the dude owned like no equipment. He came from a background of a magazine photographer, and that's like how they did it. You know, the magazine guys, they don't own much. They might own cameras, but basically every time you do a magazine job, it's one reason why you can be so creative in a sense in magazine jobs, because when they send you to photograph, you know, I remember once I was working for a guy and we photographed Robert Palmer, you know, the golfer, and he just decided he wanted to shoot him at 4x5. And Sports Illustrated was like, okay. And he literally rented the whole thing. We showed up with 4x5 cameras, the whole 9 yards. We got everything we needed. We shot the whole thing. You know, he lit them, you know, whatever lights we rented. And he shot it exactly to his cool idea because the magazine was fronting it. He made almost nothing because magazines pay shit. But, I mean, actually the rental was like 3 times his fee. But you know what? That's what they do. It's just how that's magazine photography. It's a whole other thing. But anyways, getting a little diverted there. But my point is this. There's tons of opportunities. And you're going to tell me I'm not in New York, I can't rent stuff. There's, I think it's called lensrentals.com or something that's pretty big. You can get stuff. In fact, I lived in kind of, I lived near Boston, but I lived kind of a, you know, suburban town outside of Boston, and there was a place that you could rent photo equipment. In fact, when I was in college, I remember there was a young lady, she rented a medium format camera, you know, because we didn't have enough in the school for everybody, because it was an art school and it was whatever. And she needed it for a project, she just rented it. You know, went out and rented it. And that was the first time I ever experienced that. I was like, oh, that's so interesting. You can just rent stuff. And it really empowers you because you literally can have anything. And, you know, yeah, that's what you do. So I think I'm giving, this is like a New Year's advice, much too late because it's like the end of, actually it's February, I guess. Yeah, I mean, if you want to do it, just do it. It's like, I feel like so many people say they want to do something, they want to travel, they want to do this, they want to do that, but they're not willing to make that sacrifice that they need to do the thing. And if you really want to be a photographer commercially, then you need to really make a plan. I picked up, I remember, I mean, these books are probably not at all useful to you now because they're old, but I picked up 2 books when I was trying to learn, because I did not have any business classes. One was called, well, The Photo Assistant was one, which was awesome, by the way. Actually, I don't know if that book's still out there. If it's been updated, look for it. The Photo Assistant, it's awesome. The reason why I say updated is because it talks about equipment, but it talks about like how to be a photo assistant, you know. And what's interesting is because I went to art school, we had this photo assistant come in one day to kind of tell us about the Boston industry, and he basically was like, I hate it, I'd rather be an artist. And everybody was like, oh God, it's terrible. But man, being a photo assistant was amazing. It was one of my favorite times of my life. So, you know, but this book was called The Photo Assistant, and it really talks about the idea that, you know, you as a photo assistant are not just some piece of crap that's carrying somebody's gear. You're part of the shoot. You're an important part of the shoot, you know, and you got to treat it like that. And that's how you get work. And essentially, you know, I did, and that's how I was a very successful photo assistant. But anyways, the other one's called, now I remember, The 20-Something's Guide to Creative Self-Employment. And it was all about, you know, being young and being an entrepreneur, and what you do. And it's actually really funny because I remember very specifically in the book, you read all the way to like to the last chapter, and the last chapter is like a page, and it says, stop reading. It says, don't read this chapter until you've been doing your business for 1 year. And, I'm sure a lot of people would just read it, but I didn't. I was like, you know what? This guy throughout this whole thing has been giving me great advice. I'm going to stick to it. And I remember reading it a year later, and I don't think if I had read it right away, I don't remember exactly what the chapter was about, but it was definitely stuff that you wouldn't have understood unless you had been doing it for a year. So it was very smart how he did it. But anyways, that book was all about exactly what I'm telling you. If you really want to do it, I know you're broke because you're young. I know you have a college, whatever, blah, blah, backed up. Yeah. You know what, though? But if you want to do it, you can do it. And honestly, you can actually be very successful working on your own and have tons and tons of free time. Does that mean that you're going to be able to go on tons of vacations because you have lots of free time? Probably not. You're probably going to spend that free time doing other things. But if you're a creative, especially now, I mean, this was before digital, you got a digital camera. If you have a photo studio and you're not shooting a job, you could just be shooting. You could just be doing photography, Just go into it smart. You think about it. Plan with a little bit of money. Get yourself out there a little bit. Do some jobs. Get that income coming in. Don't spend that income going out to dinner. Spend that income buying more equipment. There's almost no piece of equipment that I own that I didn't buy from a job. Like basically, I've done jobs just to pay for equipment. Instead of doing a rental, I buy the equipment before the job and I keep it because I take the fee from the job and I keep it, right? So that's how I gained all my gear. I didn't just sit there one day with like a shopping list and go out and buy stuff. I mean, I did it a little bit at a time. And that's how you do it. Everybody who says to me, oh, your gear is expensive or yeah, well, you know what? It took me time and I earned every bit of it. So there you go. That's kind of my advice. It's a little motivative, I guess, maybe not a friendly one. I don't know. Hopefully it was motivating, but I think you got to do it, right? I mean, I feel like that's it. We want to be photographers, commercially. And if we really want to do it, we can do it. And all the people that tell you there's no work out there, bullshit. It's just changed. The work has changed. People need photos. It's not going to be what it used to be. And that's the way life is always. People always tell you that. When I was first starting, all the photographers were lamenting what it was like in the 70s and 80s or whatever. All the older photographers, 70s, later photographers, 80s. They were like, oh, the industry is terrible and, blah, blah, and there's no work. Well, there is work. There's people that stuck with it. Because people and businesses, and I've talked about this before, and if you want to watch my video about what you actually get paid for, they do ultimately understand the quality of a professional photographer, which is the dependability, the getting the job done, the being there, even if they don't necessarily see the difference per se in the actual photo. So that's what I would say there. If you're going to be a pro, do it. Just do it part-time, do it whatever, hang your shingle. When somebody asks you what you do, you might work at the bank, let's say, but you do photography part-time. When somebody says, what do you do? I'm a photographer. Because that's what you do, right? That's your passion, that's your business, you're growing it, and that's it, So I'd love to know what you guys are doing. Are the pros watching this? Are people that have businesses and people that are growing businesses? Is that what you want to do? Or am I completely crazy and none of you guys want to do this professionally and you just like to watch videos? I'm really curious because that's interesting to me because I seem to get a lot of positive feedback when I do business ones. So I'm curious where you guys stand, and I can try to do some more there. I know people had asked me to do very specific ones on getting into certain types of business, which I can talk loosely about. I mean, the only thing I can really talk a lot about is advertising/fashion, because that's what I really did. The rest of it is all, from people I know and little bits and pieces. But yeah, I think it's always the same though, right? I just said that nobody gets into it the same way, but in fact, in the end, it really is all the same. You are true to yourself. You want to do it. You focus. You keep putting yourself out there. Whenever somebody says, and also I'm going to say, because I hate these kind of people, so don't be this person. Don't be the person that's constantly handing your card like a crazy person. I'm a photographer. Here's my card. I can do this. Don't do that. Somebody says, what do you do? I'm a photographer. Let them ask you. Let them come to you, right? Because I'll tell you what, they will. People will come to you. They'll be like, hey, you're a photographer, right? Yeah, check out my work. Here it is, whatever. Don't be over anxious. Being over anxious is crazy. Let them come to you. When people come to you, it puts you in a position of power. If you're constantly trying to hawk your stuff, it puts you in a discount mart way. And that's not the way to be. It really isn't. So let's all get out there in 2019 and do it. But yeah, let me know, guys. If you haven't already, please subscribe. It's really nice weather right now in New York, so I'm probably going to shoot a few of these. So you guys, because there's a few topics I want to talk about, so I'll post another one as soon as I get it edited. So have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time.